sorry. Oh. Rose, it's you.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Welcome, hello and welcome. Bienvenue tout le monde. Karibu. Welcome. My name is Rose Maruru, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Epic Africa. Epic Africa is leveraging data and technology to tell the stories of African civil society organizations. Everything from, what do we do? Where do we do it? How do we do it? Who funds us? Who supports us? And what is the impact that we have? So we've been doing this to bring visibility to the incredible work and essential work that African civil society organizations do, often against really daunting challenges and invisibility. So we're really working to bring visibility and to drive support, financial and other of the sector. So today we will be presenting to you a recent report based on data that we have been collecting over the last several years as we map and survey the sector. And the story is around, the sources of funding for African civil society organizations, but we are not there yet. We have a wonderful event today, and I'll just quickly walk you through what's going to happen in the next hour and a half. Although we are welcoming, we're going to have a half hour at the end, also for those that can stay back when we have kind of a talk back and answer questions. So I will present the report, and after that, I'm the host, our moderator, Liz Ngozi, will take over, moderate some questions that will come from the audience as I speak. And even now, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them on the chat. And then Liz will moderate a discussion among our three panelists who just really, who bring different perspectives to African philanthropy. And then after that, we will go into another, Q&A. And after that, then we're kind of sparing some surprise announcement at the end, of course, including making the report accessible. So we'll have a link where you can download the report. So please stay up to the end to get the links to the report and also the little surprise that we have in store for you. So maybe Liz, shall we start? Mm-hmm.
Yes, please go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So we're really inviting a conversation. So let me just start by presenting sort of the very top sort of findings, or many findings, but with all these perhaps are the most salient ones for today's discussion. So this is all about challenging the myths that many of us know and some don't about individual giving or individual African giving, particularly to civil society organizations. We know that Africans give. I mean, that's in our culture, but what is less well known, less documented is giving by individuals to organizations, specifically civil society organizations. Next, please. So we wanted to tell the stories of how this giving is happening. And before I can talk a little about why we chose to tell this particular story, maybe let me tell very quickly the story of EPIC Africa itself and how and why we came into being. And it's really the story of lived experience and observing, lived experience in the sector and observing over a number of decades now, just sort of the really interesting and important work that our civil society organizations do, but often with great challenges and invisibility. And sometimes even the very communities where this work is not happening may not be aware of the work that's going on. And yet having been beneficiaries of both philanthropy, giving and generosity of Africans, our communities, our relatives, our friends, but really sort of not seeing another and hearing a different sort of narrative about who we are and that we're helped by others, like we have no agency. And so for us, when we found, that individuals actually giving to organization, it was like, wow, we kind of know it intrinsically, but like I said, it's little documented and it's not very much in our conscience. So the three key reasons then, if I can sum it up, of why we wanted to tell this story is that first, the narratives about individual giving, how we Africans give, and to whom we give and how we give, has really been shaped by external voices and narratives, and even those of us who are in the sector as Africans fail to see what's right in front of our eyes, what we experience, and somehow don't think of it as philanthropy. Next. The next reason that we wanted to tell this story is also that, like I said before, EPIC Africa is all about using data to fill important knowledge gaps and to raise the visibility of African civil society. So we're really delighted to share the experience of individual giving as revealed by the recipient organizations themselves. So unlike some of the documentation that has happened around individual giving, which has tended to come from the givers, particularly high net worth individuals who have been studied quite a bit, we spoke to organizations that told us they receive individual giving. And finally, of course, one other reason for telling these stories is that we think it's such empowering story. It's a really empowering story, and that can inspire not just more confidence, unleash our agency, but really just begin to become sort of the basis for then figuring out how do we as a sector, how do we as African leverage or tap into our generosity and our values of solidarity and mutuality. Next. So, as we said, the data that we have, or the findings that we have, really are beginning to challenge long-held assumptions. And these myths include the first myth that, that's challenged by what we found out about the giving of individuals, is that individual giving in Africa is insignificant and less impactful. So the next myth, the second myth that our data challenges, is that Africans primarily give informally and primarily or mostly to family and friends. A third myth that's also challenged is that individual giving is localized and reactive in nature, that we give towards very short-term sort of emergency type of responses. Somebody needs to buy medicine, so you give, or, there's a funeral, so we give, and that sort of giving, rather than giving for long-term systemic change. And fourth myth that is challenged is that external funding displaces individual giving. That perhaps the reason Africans aren't giving is because there's external giving. But what we have seen is that both can and do exist at the same time. And a fifth myth that again is challenged is that diaspora giving is one-dimensional. Again, we've seen multiple nuanced ways that this kind of giving happens. And finally, the sixth myth, there are many others, but we just wanted to highlight these six, is that African CSOs or civil society organizations are overwhelmingly reliant on foreign funding. In fact, that's the narrative out there that we as a sector are, completely dependent on external funding. So can we go to the next slide, please? So we spoke to, as I said, we've been doing mappings and other types of surveys of African civil society organizations. And in these surveys, a question that we consistently ask is, who are your top 4? I don't know why we chose 4. I could have said 3 sources of funding. And, they're, individuals, foreign foundations, foreign governments, your own government, community funds, et cetera. And we have seen consistently that over 50% of organizations or respondents often answer or tick or include individuals, the category of individuals, as one of the top 4, and oftentimes, in fact, one of the top 2 sources of funding for them. When we first saw that data point, it was back in 2019, and we were kind of intrigued and thought, oh, maybe there's a blip, because this is not a story that we had heard of before. But then we saw it in a second, a third, and a fourth survey. And the third and fourth surveys, including this one that we've analyzed for this particular report, which was the fourth survey conducted in 2021 in the context of COVID, we interviewed, or rather surveyed, 1,027 organizations from 46 countries. And 838 of those organizations answered the funding question. And Liz, if you can move on to the next slide. And what we saw is that, in fact, that category called individual sources or individual donations actually was number 1. It wasn't just the top 4, it was actually the number 1 source of funding for CSOs at that point in time during COVID. I think we carried out this survey between, probably was June, July, September. I don't quite remember that, because I know we did the report in October of 2021 in the height of COVID, when we wanted to understand the impact of COVID on African CSOs. The second biggest source, of course, is international NGOs, which one would have thought would be probably first. And the third one, of course, is international foundations, and you can see the rest. Now, can you move on to the next one, Liz? But something that was very interesting also in the choices that we provided, so we had the individual sources, and then we had community-generated funds, and then, of course, the category called Other. And in the category called Other, it was very interesting because people wrote in things like board members, staff members, the founder, friends, who somehow they didn't consider as individuals, but they put them in this other category. So we pulled that out. The community-generated funds also, as we know, these are contributions from individuals. So we also pulled that out and added it to the 53%. And when we did that, actually, the total of organizations that cited some form of individual giving went from 53 to 65%, which was so pleasing and astounding at the same time. Can you move on, Liz? That there was this sort of magnitude of individuals and of organizations that receive, or at that point in time, were receiving donations from individuals. Now, the other thing that we looked at and that was also kind of, again, interesting and perhaps somewhat surprising, based again on the myths of how we give and to what causes we give, that actually individuals are not just giving to organizations that are doing short-term sort of emergency response work and that sort of thing, but are actually giving to organizations that are working on all variety of issues, from community development to gender to human rights, to environment and other issues. So our giving has been characterized sometimes as not addressing systemic issues, right? But actually we are seeing that, the type of issues that, individual Africans are giving to are quite varied. Many of them addressing longer term root causes. Next one. And then the other thing that we looked at is, of course, what kind of activities or what kind of approaches were these organizations that cited individuals as a important source of giving? What type of work do they do? And here again, really interesting to see the variety of the types of work that these organizations do, ranging from capacity building and training to advocacy, to organizing and mobilizing, to service delivery, of course, information sharing, etc., etc. So again, very different from what we had before. Next one, Liz. So the other find that was interesting was, the correlation between the age of organizations and reporting individual giving as one of the top sources. So we saw that 70% of the organization that cited individual giving as a top source of funding were at least 5 years old. And what we deduced from that is that trust, somehow we took that to represent trust, that by the time you're 5 years, people know about you, you have some traction, and therefore people are comfortable and confident giving. We also saw that the budget size did not matter, and organizations that were 50% of the organizations actually that again reported individual giving as an important source have a budget or had a budget of below $100,000 a year. Next, please. So clearly, we can see that individual giving is nuanced, nuanced in terms of issues, nuanced in terms of involving networks, involving individuals, nuanced in terms of the type of activities that are being funded. Liz, can you move to the next one? Yes, and interconnected, of course, the interconnectedness, which involves personal connections as well as networks. And as I said, that other category and what people wrote in there that shows, personal connections is also one of the ways that this giving is happening. But clearly also, we think that individual giving is likely under-accounted for, since many cultural norms of giving would not be labeled as philanthropy. Again, I think that other category kind of demonstrates some of that. So it is a complex space that obviously I hope, as I said, this report, sparks conversations and interest in really wanting and beginning to understand the complexities that define this sector. Next. So our call, I guess we can call this our major conclusion and call to action is that, I think this report also just demonstrates this beautiful reality of how, our lived, our ways of giving, our traditions, whether it's Ubuntu, Harambee, Esusu, and it has many names in different places, how we can marry this with obviously modern technology and other modern ways of practices that can of giving to really leapfrog and really entrench individual giving and local giving as a real driver of our sector. So really, so we're really excited and looking forward to not just today's conversation, but today as sort of a landmark in the beginning of a flourishing sort of area of interest and inquiry. So thank you. And now I will introduce, so join us, join us in this movement, what we're calling a movement, really to unleash African generosity. And we all know the proverb that, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. So we don't want to we can't walk this journey alone. We need everyone to come with us. Okay, so that's it for me. I'll now invite Liz Ngozi, our moderator. And Liz, maybe there are some questions that people have that you want me to address now, or maybe we just continue with the program. Liz?
Thank you very much, Rose. I will take it from here. It looks like people are very excited. We are so happy to have you join us. And that was such a comprehensive presentation of this groundbreaking research. Let me tell you a little bit about me before we continue on. As an African woman with technology and philanthropy, and the daughter of two renowned African storytellers, Uganda's celebrated playwright, the late Dr. John Ruganda, and UNDP's former Deputy Communications Director, Hilda Rabazare Paki, who's joining us from Kampala, I'm reminded of the African proverb, until the lion has their own storyteller, the hunter will always be the hero. Today, through this pioneer report, we're witnessing African organizations tell their own story of giving, backed by compelling data that challenges long-held external assumptions, as Rose shared with us. As founder and CEO of the International Social Impact Institute and as an adjunct assistant professor at New York University's Center for Global Affairs, I'm deeply honored that Rose entrusted us with designing the report and related materials and co-organizing this gathering, demonstrating how African organizations can harness both human creativity and AI-powered tools to tell their stories effectively. As we move into the Q&A portion of this segment, I invite you to share your questions about the remarkable findings that Rose has just presented, which reveal again that 65%, I'm going to say it again, 65% of African CSOs receive support through individual donations, community funds, and personal networks. So I see some questions coming through. Rose, if you'll indulge me, there are a lot of questions, so hopefully we can get through some of them. Maybe if we can't get all of them now, we can get them later. So here is a question from Good Chance Mariki. I would like to know, are these individual donors locally found or includes cross-border ones as well?
Good question, and one that we ourselves have. So like I said, this report and our research really just barely scratches the surface. So there's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot that's not known about who these individuals are, but we have reasonable confidence that they're mostly individuals who are on the continent.
All right.
So I said, it opens a whole, there's so many interesting questions. Who are these individuals? Why do they give? How much do they give? How often do they give? What do organizations that are getting donations, how do they attract these individuals? So lots of interesting questions that we're really looking forward to exploring as we go forward. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So we have a question from Jakuba Gasama. Hi, from Silicon Valley, California. How hard was it to get funding for this work? And what are the next steps and need to continue on this groundbreaking journey, please?
I had to chuckle because we did this in 2021 during COVID. We had no money. Actually, the two people that led this was myself and the then colleague David Bernard, and gave our 6 months to do this particular survey that we have been citing. So but seriously, research is hard to find, infrastructure work is hard to fund, because a lot of the funding that exists in the sector is are siloed within thematic areas or sectors, so health, education, climate, et cetera, et cetera. But the kind of work that we're doing is providing the infrastructure, strengthening the ecosystem for this work to be able to be carried out. So people need data to make the right decisions. People need knowledge to inform, decisions and priorities. But to produce this knowledge and to produce that data is expensive, but no one wants to fund it. So we're very grateful, Jakumba, especially to your foundation for having, after we did this survey, found us and supported us. So yes, we really are looking for support to expand, we and others to expand this work.
Okay, awesome. So let's go on to Graham Wood. Graham, I wonder about the large capacity building bucket. Whose capacity for what, and how do we know it has any impact?
That's interesting, Graham, and we ourselves asked us that question, but our sort of hypothesis is that, service delivery, for example, is very, very expensive, right? You may have to build some infrastructure, but a lot of the nature of work that many of these organizations do is about, quote unquote, sensitizing communities. I think, Graham, you're familiar with that language. So we want to do I don't know, sexual and reproductive health or girls. You can pick any topic. Oftentimes, there's this phase where you're trying to sort of change behavior, change mindsets, and that sort of work, which oftentimes involving I guess here it's characterized as training. But in the field, it used to be called sensitization. I don't know what we call it that, but we assume this is what this is. This capacity building thing of very local organizations. But yeah, again, interesting question to be explored. Yeah.
Okay. So Rose, this question comes from Malawi, from Mahango Ifumbo Youth Organization. So it's Luis Mahango from Ifumbo Youth Organization, Malawi. You said we depend on foreign aid. What's your solution to this? And I think that's the perception that we, right? I think is what you said.
That's the story. That's the perception that our sector is overwhelmingly dependent on foreign funding, foreign aid. And what our survey is, or the results are telling us, is that probably not. I mean, what we don't know, of course, is the amounts of money that come from individual giving compared to the amount of money that comes from, let's say, a bilateral agency or from a foreign foundation. But we also have another hypothesis, which is that it's actually not a well, it is because it hasn't been explored, that this sector, this civil society sector is so huge and is so diverse, it's not homogeneous. And there are all kinds of organizations. And again, this is so understudied, and so we tend to lump everything together. But we think that obviously there is a type of African civil society organization or non-governmental organization that is 100% fully dependent on external funding. Because we also know that there are many organizations, many of them well-known, that were set up by funders. They were set up with, a nice pot of money, 100% funded. But there are also others that are really, people see a problem in their community and they start to do something about it. And it may take years to attract any external funding. So again, there's a lot that we don't know. And this is really, again, a call to do more of this so we can really know what's going on.
Great. So we've got a question about diaspora. Okay, so this question comes from Juzaida Swain, who says, "Thank you for sharing these findings. What percentage do diaspora remittances make up of the individual giving?"
I'm sorry, we did not analyze that diaspora specifically as a separate category, so we cannot answer that question yet.
But this is why we should be looking for some support to be able to answer those questions, right? Right. That's how we move this forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So someone wrote, so this is Nkosi Moyo, who said, very crucial findings. Is there in place a funding architecture in place at continental level, for instance, at the AU level, at the African Union level?
I'm not aware, but maybe when you get to the questions, I don't mean to put Becky on the line, but
I think he'll be able to answer.
he
He'd be
might be
more
able to
positioned to
just,
answer
yeah,
that. Okay.
to address
So,
that.
so
Yeah.
Becky, maybe if we can, when we get to that point, we can have you maybe answer that for us, or maybe if you can answer in the chat, that'd be wonderful. If that wouldn't be too much trouble. Thank you. Okay, we've got let's see. So we've got that one. Oh boy, I have a long one, but I think we're going to have to come to it later. There are a lot of them, and I've got to keep moving. We'll come back to these later because, I mean, obviously people are very excited about all of this. Okay, just here's one. Mark Greer. Is there data on how high net wealth, how high net wealth or net worth and ultra high net wealth individuals across the world are giving in Africa? This is a philanthropic advisor from the US, but I think that's kind of outside the scope of this. Am I correct?
It's certainly outside of the scope of our survey, but but there are some studies. There are some studies that have been done on high net worth individual giving, and some of those I think are by CAPSI. So again, Becky might be able to speak a little bit about what exists in way of research and data.
Okay. All right, great. Well, that was wonderful, but I have to make sure that we get to hear from our panel, and we will again, we will have a talk back after the webinar, so we can go into some more of these questions. But these were wonderful. And Rose, if you allow me to, I'm going to now move us into the panel segment. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, great. Now I'm honored to introduce our distinguished panelists who bring diverse perspectives on African philanthropy. First, we have Dr. Becky Nkosi, or Becky Moyo, who is the director of the Center on African Philanthropy and Social Investment at the Wits Business School in South Africa. And he is a leading voice on African philanthropy with over 20 years of experience in research and policy development. As a prolific author and thought leader, he has championed African philanthropic discourse and helped establish several continental institutions, including the African Union Foundation, which is why he would be best placed amongst us to answer the African Union question. Next, we have Sibongile or Bongi Makabela, a social worker by profession and activist by orientation. I love that, who brings deep insights into how trust enables giving through her transformative work as former CEO of both the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund and Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital Trust, recognized with the Order of Lutuli Silver for her fight against apartheid and contributions to South Africa's children. She now serves as executive director of the Barlow World Empowerment Foundation. Last but certainly not least is Oyebisi Babatunde Olusei, who is the executive director of the Nigerian network of NGOs and who has grown the network from 600 to over 3,900 organizations since 2012. His extensive experience includes work with UNICEF and leadership in civil society strengthening across Africa. As an international board member of the International Center for Nonprofit Law, he brings unique insights into how individual giving powers African civil society. I invite each of you to briefly introduce yourselves and your organization in the context of today's groundbreaking research on individual giving in Africa. Becky, if you'd like to start first, then we'll go to Bongi and then Oyebisi, please.
Right. Hello, everyone, and I'm sure it's a good day to everyone because we are in different zones. I'm Becky Moyo. I am with the Center on African Philanthropy and Social Investment at the Wits Business School, based in South Africa, but operating continentally, with an interest in studying the trends and patterns on philanthropy and social investment, training new academics and researchers in the field, as well as contributing to initiatives and mechanisms that advocate for the promotion of philanthropy especially African philanthropy, to be specific. Thank you.
Thank you. Bongi, can we hear from you?
Yes, thank you, Liz. And good day to everybody. And it's fantastic to be here and to have been invited. Thank you very much. My name is Bongi Mkhabela. And at the moment, I run a small foundation, the Bala World Empowerment Foundation. And the reason I mention it is because our focus at this point is exactly what Rose is talking about, enabling our stories to be told. And so we work in communities, trying to hear the voices of people, trying to understand where they want to take development, and then locating ourselves in support of the development. And I'm doing this after many years of practice, over 30 years of practice. And after over 30 years of practice, I've just come back to basics, exactly where I started at grassroots level. A little bit cleverer, a little bit with some insights than I started, maybe less energetic, but still as enthusiastic as I've always been. Thank you very much.
So 30 years, does that mean you started like when you're in elementary school?
Thank you, darling.
As like child labor.
Lovely comment. Thank you.
You're welcome. OABC, if we can hear from you, please.
Yes, thank you. And so good to be able to join the 155 participants that I'm seeing on the call at this time this morning. I think for me, 5 years into my executive directorship at the Nigerian Network of NGOs, I'd always said anecdotally that, individual giving is what is driving the sector. So when I was able to read this report and, that helps to evidence that anecdotal narrative that I've always used. This is very exciting for me, especially when you link it to the work that we do at the Nigerian Network of NGOs, which is a membership-based organization, moving from 600 to over 4,000 organizations now. I think we see the realities on the ground on how small nonprofits, medium-sized and large-sized nonprofits are fundraising for their work, and how individual giving is really, really helping them to do a lot in communities across Nigeria. Over to you, Liz.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. And thank you to your team for helping to amplify the story, all of your teams for helping to amplify the story. I'm going to just go ahead. Before I jump in, I want to make sure that our audience knows that they can go ahead and put their questions in the Q&A, and those questions will be brought to me once we get into the Q&A portion of this. But let's start with the first question, and I think what we'll do is we'll have you, Becky, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Sibongile, then OABC. The data reveals that trust and longevity are connected, with 70% of CSOs receiving individual gifts being 5+ years old, right? What strategies can both established and emerging organizations use to build and maintain trust with individual donors?
Thank you so much. And before I answer the question, I think it's good for us to welcome the insights from the report, which are very interesting, very positive. But as Rose also said, they did not go out to prove that individuals give more than other sources. This was just one of the questions among many. And so that raises a question around what was the research problem that the entire project sought to unpack. And I think understanding these findings on individual giving need to be located within the broader study, because as they stand on their own, they raise further questions for research, which is what I think we are all here to talk about. So I think for me to answer the question around what strategies, it would be important for me to go back in history and say that other previous research that has been conducted on giving, especially by individuals. If I look at A Nation of Givers by David Everett and others here in South Africa, as well as some of the giving reports by the Nedbank here in South Africa that looks at high net worth individuals, I look at some of the students that have produced a number of theses that are looking at different forms of giving in different contexts. Nana, for example, who wrote an endorsement for this report, just did a very interesting thesis on giving among the Akan in Ghana. One of the things that came out in the past was that individuals were very suspicious around giving to organized and institutionalized forms of entities. And so the question that arises right now is, what has changed? Why are individuals giving this much to organized institutions? So we need to ask that. And I think it speaks to the issue of trust, which means that over time, some of these organizations have had to build trust with those individuals around them, or those that they've brought into their fold, into their mandates as ambassadors of the work that they need to do. So one of the things for established and maybe new entities is to think about how individuals and community members or communities of interest can be brought into the life and activities of the organization such that they automatically become ambassadors. It's one thing to give, it's another to become an engaged giver, an ambassador for the organization. And so one of the further research questions emanating from the study for me is, who are these givers? Were they first-time givers, or these were frequent givers? Because if they are first-time givers, then it hasn't really established trust or even longevity, as the age of the institutions seem to suggest. But if they are frequent givers, second, third, fourth, it means there's been some engagement between the organizations and the givers. So, for example, some institutions will organize individual visits for those givers that are interested in the work, for them to visit the projects of the organizations over time. Ashesi University does this very well in Ghana, where every year they arrange visits by individual givers who come and see exactly what the organization is doing. So I think that element of constant engagement, and in fundraising, we call that donor development. You have to develop your donor and upgrade them from first-time givers to second-time and then to frequent givers. And I think that's an area that I'm not so sure, coming from this research, whether this is what institutions are doing or is something that they will need to do. So I think that's important in terms of engagement and building trust. The second, I think the second issue that I wanted to raise has to do with the issue of size. I know that the report suggests that budget wasn't really a determining factor, but it would be interesting to see the size of the organization, not just from a budget perspective, but the overall size of an organization. It's highly unlikely that big institutions in the continent would cite individual givers as their biggest source of giving. So I would need us to do further research to unpack that, because a lot of big institutions are driven and funded by high and big impact donors. And of course, individuals will still continue to give, and we're not taking away from that. So I think the size of the organization is another factor that we need to look into. I would want to come back to issues of quantum, issues of motives, and issues of age, which I think are very important in terms of how individuals give, and use that to speak to some of the findings that come out of the CAF reports, for example, around giving, the World Giving Reports. Sure. And link that to countries like South Africa, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Kenya, where we have seen a lot of quantified individual giving reported on an annual basis. So let me stop there, and I can come back on some of the strategies.
I feel like you've set us up for funding for additional studies, don't you think? Jointly, I feel like you teed it up, which is wonderful. And I 100% agree with you about donor engagement. When I was CEO of Africa Tikkun USA, I used to bring a lot of our donors from the US and even locally to see what the work we were doing, because it's hard for people to connect to the work if they don't actually get to see it. It's very important that we make those investments so they can really see the impact of the work that they're doing, and to be able to move them forward or through their giving journey. So thank you for sharing that with us. Bongi, I would love for you to share your perspective, especially because of just what you've done. You have definitely mobilized a lot of individuals to give. So if you could share a little bit, that would be great.
Thank you so much, Liz, and thanks, Peggy. You've covered some of the things I wanted to share. You know, this report, again, I want to say storytelling and the importance of storytelling. And why in my comment, I say it's written from a Western perspective. It's not so much the Western perspective, but we still have to reframe our issue around philanthropy and giving. And by reframing, I mean, you know, as I was reading the report and what it was saying, and when I say it affirms, was not that I was being politically correct. I was simply saying our struggle and our giving has been part of our decolonization agenda.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult when you separate these things all together, because a great deal of those who give and who have given in the continent, if we take it a couple of years back, whichever country you're looking at, those who were rebuilding the continent, the Julius Nyereres and others, who were rebuilding the continent, who were taking from their pockets to rebuild the continent. So you know, the giving, as we like to talk about it right now, is a giving of a situation that's probably been engineered such that we are accepting that there will always be the haves and the have-nots, and that the have-nots are the ones who get something. What I think is important is we tell our story, and we have to tell our story using our own frameworks, where we come from.
Yep.
And it's
Great.
very different from where America came from. It's different from, we were sitting here landless, our land taken from us, our humanity, stripped of our humanity. So the giving and the philanthropy that developed, and it is often unrecognized because often it's said that we give in churches and so on. Someone is failing to recognize that we were a people and we still remain a people in struggle and in strife. We're not there yet. We're far from being a free and a liberated people. So to a large extent, when we give, we're giving to ourselves. We are rebuilding our institutions. We are rebuilding our humanity. We are building ourselves inside out. So when you see this individual giving, and once you put it in the frameworks of CSOs and development, you kind of miss the point. And the big point you're missing, and where I want to come to just sharing with you, when we mobilize individuals within the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, which I led even before that, when I led the grassroots movement, because I come very much from grassroots, leading that grassroots movement, we had no money from any donor. We mobilized thousands of people, those who were givers, those who were professionals, those who decided they are auditors, so they will do our auditing. They are legal firms, so they will do the legal. All of that was the rebuilding of a society, rebuilding itself. And when donors were coming in, they were coming into an agenda that has been set of a people that was going somewhere. That's different from when you're talking about children not to be left behind in the US. It might sound the same, but we really are talking about different things. So the mobilization, and this is way back in the 1980s, we ran organizations without any donor funding, and we ran them successfully. And we took great matters to court and won many battles. And social movements developed and got strengthened. And the latest for me was running with the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, which was built in the environment of a new democracy. And we had to organize, and this comes to your point about trust. And and longevity. Before trust, and with trust comes shared values. The people who had to organize are people who share your values, who, when we say we want to build a better society for children, that's what they also want to see they don't want to see projects. They don't want to say you're doing well and clap for you. They want to see that this generation where we are, if we give ourselves another 50 years, children who will be born there, and that's longevity we need to be talking about. The children who will be born there will be free because we set, as systems change, people would say, we set the system to change today, but we're not changing it necessarily for tomorrow. Sure. We are changing it for the next 50 years. So the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund experience is one, when you mobilize people and you're keeping them involved and you're keeping them interested, not only in saying how well you're doing, but in saying what the issues are and where you want them. And Bheki talks about being champions, where you mobilize and you organize them to be champions, and they they match the money you raise from others, and they put the money into, I'm sorry, it's a lot to say, but
no, I'm with you. I'm with you. You know why I think it's so important? Because oftentimes I've said this, that philanthropy is so much, and when we talk about Western philanthropy, is really about power in many ways. And where that power lies is what you're talking about. That's what I'm hearing from you. And I think it's very important for us to make that distinction. So I'm with you. Keep going.
You're with me.
I'm with you.
Good.
I'm with
sorry.
you. And
I'm
I'm doing all this.
I know I'm very passionate about these things, and I'm passionate about telling the story of philanthropy from the African perspective. Yes. Now that we've getting rid of these myths, now that we've said it's a myth that we don't give, we've been giving as you've been ripping us off. We've been giving as you've been taking our diamond and our gold and our humanity. We've been giving to ourselves, that's why we're still standing today. So we've affirmed that, and we need to put that affirmation in its correct context. And then the organization, as we do, the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, we organized almost everybody. And my best donor in that time, and who's now a young man, was 7 years old. And he started giving at 7. He brought his piggy bank and he said, I want to give. And today he's a university graduate and he still gives.
Yeah.
Because
that's we talk about lifetime value of a donor.
Oh, that's longevity. You get them in there, but they're not there because they like Project X. They are there because you're enabling them to express their best in rebuilding a new humanity.
Yes.
And that's where I want to stop now.
No, I love that. I love that. And I want to hear what Oyebisi has to add to that, because he works with, a network of over 4,000 organizations. And so where do you sit on this conversation?
Yes, Liz, I think for me, I totally agree with the thinking or the thoughts from Bongi and my brother who spoke before, Moyo. But it's also to say that the report itself is giving us a common consensus on a new horizon that we're now seeing, which is to say that individual giving, which typically from practice would come from family, friends, and also the resources of the founders themselves, remains that foundation for the sustainability that we need to see in the nonprofit sector, especially among small-sized nonprofits. Again, from practice and anecdotal evidence of the type of work that I do. But how do we then use this data to ensure that laws, policies, regulations, and practices around fundraising, especially now looking at how do we tilt this towards individual giving? I'll cite an example. Today, within the anti-money laundering and countering of terrorism financing laws, anonymous donations needs to be flagged. But when you link individual giving to conversations around religion, some people don't want what the right hand is doing for the left to know. And these are some of the nuances that I think Moyo was also trying to say, that how do we also look at behaviors around some of this giving? And this gives us further nuances around the deep dive analysis that we now need to do after this very important research that we've seen. But also for me is also to bring this within the context of the trust conversations that we've been having, including looking at what are the motivations for citizens to give. Are they more likely to give to small-sized nonprofits, or they are more interested in giving to large-sized nonprofits? But also to then again say to ourselves, how do we ensure that there's a structure or economy around individual giving? I'll cite an example. If I want to give today, I either give in cash or give online. What's the role of the banks in ensuring that, when citizens want to give, the structure is there for them to be able to give? What's the role of tax incentives so that I'm able to give to causes that I'm interested in? What's the role if we decide to say we want to do crowdfunding? What does the central bank, what does the regulation from central bank look like in terms of, individual giving or being able to do crowdfunding? These are some of the things that we need to start looking at, the ecosystem that this report helps us to tease out. And now
Enabling,
the enabling
environment, right?
Thank you.
So critical, because
absolutely,
that's the thing. Without that enabling environment, you cannot really. It's very hard for us to move forward in this direction.
Absolutely. And also, what's the role of self-regulation? Because again, by the time you start mobilizing resources and asking individuals to give, how do we ensure that we're not upsetting them? How do we ensure that we fundraise ethically, asking individuals to be able to give us money? So these are some of the things that this report from, I said, it has thrown up. But it's to say that it evidences, and as I've said earlier, evidences some of the realities that I've seen on the ground in terms of, the larger pool of membership that we have at the Nigerian Network of NGOs, and how you find that they are able to do their programs and projects, but they're not paying attention to, these, because everybody wants the bulk money, because this is retail in nature. And requires a lot of begging, convincing, and all of that.
We don't beg. There's no begging. I hate when we're not professional beggars. Someone once said that, and I'm like, we don't beg. We're inviting people to be part of the solution. What we're doing. But I hear you though. But I get you. I get you.
It's framing it differently, but that's how individuals feel when they go to others to ask for this, support, inviting them to support very good causes and all of
right,
these.
Right.
These are nuances that we have to bring into the conversation.
We definitely do. And we're going to have you hold here because I think I can segue you into my next question. Then I'll have Bongi answer, and then we'll go to Becky, because now let's get into some practical strategies to help folks. So again, that research shows, I love using that 65% of African CSOs receive support through the individual donations, community funds, and personal networks. We want to know, what are some practical strategies that these CSOs can implement to better attract, engage, and retain individual donors, right? So we talk a little bit about storytelling, which is what Bongi was telling us. So what are our storytelling approaches? How can we leverage digital platforms? Because, we've got to really think about digital platforms in terms of the funding sources, even digital platforms in terms of AI, and also existing networks. So can you give us a little bit, because you're representing 4,000 organizations and plus. Let's hear from you.
So I think for me, good data management is one bit, knowing who these givers are, and knowing also who your beneficiaries are, and being able to match the giving to the beneficiaries for you to be able to tell that story. Good internal controls would help a lot, such that if I give 1 naira, you are able to match my 1 naira to a beneficiary, and you're able to tell me that because of this 1 naira, XYZ has happened to this beneficiary, and this is the progress that we're seeing. And that goes to, reporting also, and how you bring me as that individual donor into your accountability and transparency framework for reporting how you're receiving resources. The use of ICTs would also be an important area to pay attention to, from your cloud computing to big data, and also to paying attention to trends and analysis around the economy, and how this can affect, individual giving, and why do you plan for that? Of course, donor engagement. as I've said, communication, and also looking for events that can help you to engage your donors more, especially individual donors. And this might take us to conversations around crowdfunding, but also ensuring that regulations are ripe and good for, crowdfunding. But also the fact that crypto is also another good area now. How I'm paying attention to crypto regulations for the nonprofit and in ways that incentivizes giving using those types of platforms as well. Of course, your social media and heritage media engagement would become very much important. What is the heritage media saying about our sector now? Because the trust has to be sector-based before it can trickle down to an individual organization. Plus, also, it is also an individual organization that would also help us to have that sectoral trust that is needed for individual giving to thrive. So how are we managing that? Of course, looking at alternative sources of funding, some strategies around how do we use charity boxes, envelopes, charity shops, what strategies are we having in terms of being able to attract individuals to use these forms of alternative funding models for us to be able to do our work. Of course, community fundraising events are also there. Now is the time to pay attention to legacy funds as well, and also skill-based volunteering. All of these are areas that I think we would need to now start using this data to strengthen so that the ecosystem for individual giving is there and that nonprofits are able to tap into that.
Okay, I'm with you. So the top three, because we have a lot of great nuggets. I just want you to give me three, because I always say 3 people can do 3 things. What are the the most 3 critical things they should do?
Good data management,
Mhm.
strong internal controls that can hit storytelling, and also the use of ICTs.
Love it. Thank you so much. Let's take it back to Bongi right now, but that was wonderful. You're muted, Bongi.
I just take it exactly where he leaves it.
Okay.
Good data management and
Yes.
setting up the platforms. The reality is, as NPOs, we probably don't have the capacity. And this brings me to an element of relationships that we need to forge with the markets. See, if I have a relationship, as we had when I led my organization, we had a relationship with a bank that would, because of all the other things, keeping transparent, being accountable, and all the good things that you put out there and the story you tell, they're able to convey to their market, to the people who walk into the bank every day, why they should give to you, why it's important. And now silently, instead of me dealing with one-on-one people, I'm silently dealing with thousands of people at the same time. Every time they go and they do business and they put their credit cards, I get a percentage from the bank, which is a donation that comes from the individual. I keep in touch with both the market, the individual, as well as the institution. So I think we as CSOs have to then find, where do we find, because trying to manage on our own platforms all this data could be very difficult. But if once we link to organizations, I mean, other organizations have done it and have done it successfully in and I think amongst the workers in particular, how to collect money from workers. And we've got United Ways, which has done an amazing job there. But there is also, in today's world, the opportunity of collecting money through a number of other platforms that you don't necessarily control, and you don't want to control. You don't want the funding. You don't want the complications. What you want is to keep the integrity of your story. That is what is important. The second thing that I think is important for CSOs is to enable the voice on the ground to be heard.
Yes.
If we look at our job as to being to amplify the voice on the ground, because that voice brings legitimacy with it and integrity with it, and trust comes from the voice, and people love to hear their own story told in their own voice. So if we then and this is fantastic, because once we have the platforms and we can connect, then we can tell thousands of stories, powerful and our people begin to see themselves. There's a ripple effect. There is no reason why, as a sector, we are the least spoken about in the media. I can't figure
it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
Rose is agreeing with it. Rose, you want to join in with this?
Yeah. I would love to.
Go ahead, please come join. Please spotlight her with us. Okay, great.
That point is so crucial because there's so many stories of individual organizations and the unicorns who are changing the world by themselves, right? And we know that's not true.
No.
But the collective story, and that's where for us data is so important, and why it is so important also to have this infrastructure of organizations and entities like Epic Africa and others that are doing that work doing the collective impact, because we're not just providing our services to communities and people left behind. We create jobs, Bongi, but no one talks about us as an employer. And we mostly employ
significant number of jobs.
Young graduates who can, because we often don't have many resources to employ very qualified people, right? So we train them, and then after 2 or 3 years, they go where they can get benefits, right? So, and we buy goods and services. I mean, sometimes you can't find a hotel room in my city. It's because NGOs are meeting, so our sector, we drive the economy, but we're never seen in those terms. It's like, those people who do good works,
Because we don't see ourselves that way either.
We don't
so we're not talking about, so we're not speaking about ourselves in that way. Like saying when we're begging. Yeah.
It's like reimagining the whole thing, you know what I mean? And that confidence. And, if we can go to the Minister of Finance with data to say, hey, Mr. Minister, in this country X or whatever, we're employing, 50,000 people. Yeah. So we're doing X, Y, Z. This is our contribution as a sector. And therefore, that's where we need to be tax-free. That's why you need not to tax us, because we're actually subsidizing government. You know what I mean? But we don't have the data. So we're very weak, in terms of negotiating, for more enabling environment. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
OABC wants to come in. Let's come in, OABC. I feel this is getting hot.
Yes,
but my WhatsApp is blowing up. There's so many questions for you. So I've got to be able to bring us in. Let Becky say something. Becky can say something too, and then I got to answer they have questions for you from the audience. Go ahead.
Totally agree with Rose on this, and this is the argument I've used in my work when engaging with regulators, is to say that the work we do has a catalytic effect on the economy. Looking at the workshops I do, which help hotels to run effectively. Looking at the travels that I have to pay for, which help the airlines to be able to run effectively. Plus also the taxes we pay, whether as employees of nonprofits or the VAT that we pay. So these are important arguments that we now need to start nuancing in ways that helps us to show the pride that we have as civil society, but also to be able to negotiate better.
Yep.
Okay. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yes, thank you. Becky, do you want to jump in, or okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to say one thing about the enabling environment. Way back 1992, I was part of a study that proposed the creation within South Africa of an enabling environment. And I think we can take some of those things beyond South Africa. Some of that was advocated for and taken into legislation. And government agreed. And we, as a matter of fact, we have some of the policies. They're not exactly where they need to be, but they're somewhere. And I think, Rose, with the evidence you have, we can together push for greater enabling environment within the continent. Thank you.
Bongi, are you speaking about triple BEE?
No. This is way before
before that. Okay.
Before all that. It was just a study called Creating an Enabling Environment for CSOs.
Okay.
And that's the study that identified at that time there were over 40,000 NGOs in the country, and it then did all the calculations of how these contribute to the economy.
Okay. Okay, great. Becky, let's let you chime in, but my WhatsApp is on fire. I have so many questions for you, so I need to be able to let the audience, have their questions answered.
Yeah, thanks. Let me start on the last point that everyone is making around the contributions of the nonprofit sector or civil society towards employment. So in addition to what Bongi has just said, there is also the John Hopkins study on the nonprofit sector. And a lot of countries in Africa were part of that study. In South Africa, it's called the size and scope of giving. Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and I think Nigeria could have been part of that. It was a study led by Lester Solomon, who wanted to really get the settlers' accounts to actually take into account the contributions of the non-profit sector. We are currently doing another study ourselves at CAPSI, looking at 17 countries around the contribution of the non-profit sector towards creation of dignified and fulfilling jobs for young Africans. So in the next 2 years or so, we'll be sharing some of the findings. But in terms of what you were asking for, I mean, I have 3 points. So one is, I think CSOs need to, so I'm not going to repeat what others have said, but let me just choose on other 3 points. So I think one is, it's important for CSOs to demonstrate impact. I think giving is in everyone's DNA, but people want to be seen to be contributing towards changing people's lives. I mean, if you ask people why they give, they can give you all sorts of reasons, including religious beliefs and stuff. But one of the top motives is that I want to make a difference in somebody's life. And I think it's important for CSOs to be able to demonstrate that they are actually making that difference in people's lives. Recent research that has just been published by our colleagues from the Lilly School looking at Muslim giving among Africans in Nigeria, for example, demonstrates this, but also the similar studies in Pakistan and Turkey also show that, one of the top reasons why people would continue to give to an institution is if they see themselves as making a difference to people's lives. So I think demonstrating impact is one of those issues that I would urge CSOs to actually do. And there are so many ways that we can talk about that. The second is, I think it's important for CSOs, when it talks about telling stories, I think documenting different stories, good and bad, is actually very important for CSOs to do. And this is one of the weaknesses of most CSOs. We rarely document our experiences and tell our stories that sets us apart and unique. We end up finding ourselves just locked up in providing technical reports to donors and all of that. But in that moment, we forget to tell our real stories. And I think sharing your struggles is part of what people would want to see, because a lot of people who give, they want to see themselves as part of the solution. And I think,
make them the heroes. So
the way to do that, if you can bring people to the solutions, is actually very important. I've just completed doing a study of Zima Alliance, which is a project that was done by a couple of donors in Zimbabwe during the crisis. And one of the things that comes up there is that solutions actually exist where problems are.
Yeah.
And in most cases, you are likely to get a lot of different forms of giving from the communities. They are the first to actually respond than international funders and others. And so I think the third point is really for CSOs to be embedded in communities. So community embeddedness is another strategy that I would talk about.
100%.
So, and that takes us back to one of the issues that Rose raised, which is, how do Africans give? What are the vehicles and what are the principles behind? So Ubuntu is one of those, and you cannot really find Ubuntu without community embeddedness, and that will address issues of solidarity. If you are working as a collective, you are embedded in a community. The community would want to be in solidarity with your struggles, with your good work, but they would also want to reciprocate. In what you do, they reciprocate. And there are also issues around sustainability. There are issues around self-reliance, dignity, which you will find in a community. And a good example here is a 40-year-old organization in Zimbabwe called ORAP, which started as just looking at the problems of Matabeleland South and asking each household to donate $1 a year. And that's what they did, and that's how they started. And today they are 40 years old, still relying on that particular model. The same applies to the Foundation for Development, for Community Development in Mozambique, which is Mrs. Graça Machel also started. It also started with individual givers by women who actually responded to issues that they were dealing with. And again, that's an institution that is still standing till today. So this takes us really back to the question of trust. And trust here, I want to distinguish between two forms of trust. One is the competency trust. Is the CSO able to do what is claims to do from a competency technical point of view? But the most important form of trust for me is the interpersonal trust. And this is the trust that the CSO will have to develop with these individual donors and the community that it works with. So those three will be what I would emphasize at this point. Of course, there are many others which my co-panelists have also raised, and others that we may not have the time to deal with at the moment. So let me end it there just by emphasizing community embeddedness, documenting stories, and demonstrating impact.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can I add 2 to that, just to reinforce what you said? Storytelling. Why I love AI as much as it's gotten a bad rap, it's that it can now help us to tell these stories, right? We don't have to have these big marketing teams, these big teams to be able to tell these stories. We can use AI to be able to really synthesize the stories in ways that are not NGO speak, but that they're in language that the people we want to communicate with can understand. So I just want to add that one piece. And then the final thing that I just learned from my mom, hi mom, who's in Uganda, is thank people. I can't tell you how many times I'm asked and asked and asked, but I'm not thanked for giving, right? Thanking is such a very basic thing, but it is in thanking that you create that relationship, right? I mean, obviously the accountability is important, but that very fundamental thing of thanking and thanking in a way that makes sense to me, right? That whether it's, you know, if I'm a huge donor and I need it to be plastered on a billboard or whatever, but that is a very important thing, is that thank you before you start asking again, because I can't tell you how many organizations mess up on that. So before I go into the questions, I have to ask, and I'm begging here, panelists, distinguished panelists, will you stay for the talk back? Because I have so many questions that I cannot have answered in this segment. But if you would allow us, you stay a little bit longer for the talk back. Can I have you hold on with us? Can I borrow some time from you? Yes? Thank you. Okay, folks, we're going. All right, so I have got, let me see who I can go with. Rose, if there's anything you want to add in, but let's see. We've got Ziblim Abdul Karim, who says, how can CSOs in Africa be assisted to promote local giving to boost the work and support CSOs are providing to communities and its people? Whoever wants to take this on, go ahead. And I can reread it. So how can CSOs in Africa be assisted to promote local giving to boost the work and support CSOs are providing to communities and people? We kind of answered it a little bit, but if you want to add something, maybe Oyebisi, you look like you want to come in.
Yeah, I think it's a two-way thing.
Yep.
But also it has to be a whole of sector approach. And when I say a whole of sector approach, I mean there's a role of government here. And there's a role of regulations in inspiring public trust, but there's also the role of non-profit data in us being able to now curate whether our economic impact or the impact of individual organizations in ways that inspires trust and action on the part of citizens. And so that's why I'd say that it's going to be a collective activity, a multi-stakeholder approach. Of course, within that is also the breakdown that needs to happen. What's the role of foundations? What's the role of corporate social responsibility? What's the role of individual organizations? And how are we telling our stories as individual organizations? And what exactly are our beneficiaries and our staff saying about us? Mm-hmm. These are critical to how we're able to build that, what I would call the ecosystem of how we are seen and how we are treated and how we're, given resources, whether money or, skilled volunteering, as it were. So I do think the onus is on all of us as practitioners in the field to play a role. And that's why I keep hammering on internal controls. What does your internal control say? What does your internal and external communication with your audience look like? What's your branding like? How are you telling stories about the impact? If it is only 5 people that you can support, how are you taking us through the journey of the 5, the growth, the challenges that you have seen, the failures, and how are you telling us how you're managing things? So it's on all of us, whether as government or whether as the practitioners in the field as well. But how to get there requires a whole lot of thought through strategy, requires a lot of sit down, a common understanding and consensus on what enabling environment looks like and how this can enable us to be able to do what we do effectively, but also how do we collect data that helps us to track this success and impact.
Okay, don't leave yet, because there's another question. There's a question specifically for you. Could you elaborate on the return on investment for the giver in addition to discussing the strategy? But let's make it quick so I can go ahead and let other folks in.
So I think usually the return on investment for the giver is first altruistic, the fact that you've been able to contribute to something meaningful.
Mhm.
The other is when we come back to you and thank you, like you have said, but also then show how we've used your $5, your $10 to be able to, fulfill our vision and mission. And you can take pride in that because usually at the end of the year like this, everybody wants to do good. And so when you're talking to colleagues, you're able to say, yeah, sometimes ago I supported this organization. They did so well, ABC. That's the altruistic feelings that you have, but also more importantly, the connection to your faith, whether you're a Christian or Muslim or worshiping other gods, there's that connection that you find there. But more importantly, the ROI to me would be how government is incentivizing that giving, where you can get your tax deductible, whatever, or you can get some refunds because you have used that money to do good. That would be a good one economically. But in terms of your happiness, your mental health, which cannot be quantified, I think that's one return on investment that I would go for.
I love that. Okay, Becky, I'm coming to you with this one. I think this is from Inde. I'm sorry if I did mispronounce this. Inde Sirang Bakurin. Getting data and good documentation is a big challenge regarding civil society's work. How can this be improved? Obviously, as someone who's done a lot of research, you kind of are the best place to answer this question, Becky.
Well, I think one is obviously finding ways to conduct research in ways that are much efficient, but also least expensive. Research is expensive, so I think with new technologies and some of the tools and platforms that we now have, it could in a way make doing research much easier, especially in spaces where there's even no connectivity whatsoever. So, for example, some of the work that we are doing across the 17 countries includes using tools like Corpo Collect, which you can actually go to the villages and just collect data, and it only gets to be uploaded when you get to connect back in the city. So I think thinking about new ways and new tools that are available to make research easier is something that I would urge. Secondly, I think is also access to data, especially for some of the information that we might be interested in. So, for example, if you ask how do high net worth individuals give, who do they give to, etc., getting that information is not always very easy, especially in an African setting. There's a bit of control and fear around sharing of that data. So how do we access data that we know, if it is given, is likely to open up a lot of avenues for policy influence, for policy changes, but also for creating the sustainability of some of these initiatives. And then I think finally, when you have conducted data, I think part of what we struggle with, and I'm happy that Rose and team have done it very well, that at times we produce the reports, but the reports are done in such a way that they are so difficult to understand, to access. And so they just, produced and they sit in the shelves just for a few people to unpack. So there's a way in which you can produce the reports for a specific audience, but then you then go a step further to just packaging them in ways that are easily accessible and in ways that easily resonate with the audience. So, for example, in our case, we are doing a technical study on the contributions of the non-profit sector towards dignified and fulfilling jobs for young people. But, there are technical things there that if you just left it like that, not many people would actually like and even read the report. So what we have done is to then say, here are the findings. let's then ask young people to take these findings and repackage them
Right.
in ways that are relatable to them as young people. So
Right.
they would then take that and use whatever is available, TikTok. And I mean, we've seen how musicians have managed to break the market just by using tools like TikTok. So why can't we use the same tools to actually disseminate our findings and research and all of that? And with artificial intelligence, I think it's so much easier to actually do some of those things. So I would think that there are issues of access, there are issues of resources, but there are also issues around how we actually really just package and disseminate what is coming out of the studies and not leaving it to technical people only to read the reports, but to make it available to the wider audience.
Okay, thank you. So Bongi, I know you're ready, but I have a question for you, but I've got to launch this Africa Giving Day initiative before the official time ends. Then we'll come back to all the millions of questions that are left, okay? So if you just will indulge me on that. This is like, it's a good thing we organized this for 2 hours because there is really two plus hours of engagement. So let me go ahead and go back to my slides so that I can get that going. And I'm enjoying this. I wish I wasn't just moderating because I really just want to be able to unpack this. I'll watch the recording so I can see even more. And as I'm doing this, let's see. Can we see my screen?
It's coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we want to hear from all of you. Right now, we had almost 600 people register for this webinar. I think we have about 300 who have been, or over a period of time, have been watching this as we go live. And then there'll be people watching this as a recording. We wanted to make sure that we also included you in this campaign, right? I mean, in this storytelling. And so we decided to launch Africa Gives Day, right? And you're going to see between the report that Rose is going to share with you, between this campaign we've created and all the graphics you've seen, we actually leverage AI to help us, working with a real live designer. So to Becky's point, AI can really help to amplify stories and make them much more accessible. So we want to give you on December 6th the opportunity to share your stories of giving. And we're going to collect them later using hashtags to be able to crowdsource all of that so that we're going even further leveraging digital platforms, social media to tell this. So why this campaign matters is that, this groundbreaking research that revealed, that 60% of African CSOs receive support through individuals, community funds, and their personal networks, right? We got that. On this December 6th, we're going to have you join us in documenting how you as Africans give through your diverse means, challenging those long-held assumptions about philanthropy in Africa. So the goals are to document diverse forms of African giving, challenge myths, right? We're continuing to challenge those myths, amplify your giving stories, and then build momentum for sustained African giving, right? So this is year one. We're not going this is just really sort of a social media campaign. But we're going to do this in three simple steps. First, we're going to ask you to go ahead and find your story format, right? You can take a photo of yourself or have an existing photo of you doing, donating, volunteering, whatever it is you do. We've created Canva templates. We're providing you the links later to be able to upload your photos into. We want you to write a giving story, whatever that looks like for you. And I encourage you to use AI, ChatGPT, or whatever to help you make that story compelling. And then share how you give give. Is it time, money, skills, networks? What does that look like for you? And then we want you to share your posts. Use these hashtags. We have Challenging the Myths and Africa Gives Day. And if you use those hashtags, we'll be able to collect all the stories and bring them together. We want you to tag these accounts. In fact, this toolkit is the link to it is being placed in the chat, so you can go ahead and get it right away. And on X, you'll tag those accounts, or if you're doing it on Facebook or Instagram, or LinkedIn, you can use these accounts. And then if it's on Instagram, you can go ahead and tag my account, and we will amplify you. And of course, remember to include the report link because we want people to be able to access this report on their own. And then we want to make sure that you tag 3 friends to share their stories. All right, so we're trying to get this out to as many people as possible. share it to all of your different networks, and then reshare when you see other people's stories using, finding them using the Africa Gives Day hashtag or Challenging the Myth hashtag. Please go ahead and reshare and amplify, because the whole point is for us to get it out there, to get other folks involved. We've created 3 social media examples posts for you. So if this is what it would look like if you did on Instagram. We've given you the graphic. You would just write in your content and you would upload your image and you would write whatever message you love, making sure that you have the link to the report and the hashtags. On LinkedIn, this is another example, but this time you're using our Challenging the Myths graphic. And then the third is an example if you've created something on Facebook. Again, this would be using another template we've created, and you can write in your whatever your message is. During the talkback, I'm happy to demonstrate how you would do this for those of you who are not that comfortable with this, but we've given you these links. So you click on this and you get the templates I give because, and you can upload your photo and your message to it, and then download it and use it in your social media post. Challenging the Myths graphics, these are already some graphics from what we've shared in the data that you can use if that's what you want to amplify. And then we have social media frames that we've created, again, that you can use on your own to tell the story. So go ahead and play with it. We've also, on Sunday, I generated this song using Perplexity, ChatGPT, and Udio. That is sort of a campaign song that we'd love for you to listen to with us, but also to share with others. And the team helped me to come up with it because they proposed different genres and how we might want this to be. So it was crowdsourced completely. And you might want to share the key statistics as well. So if you have any trouble working on this, you can go ahead and contact, actually it should be from Epic Africa. The person to contact would be Joyce, but we'll provide her information. And then of course, Ludmilla from the Institute, who is the person who designed all of that. So let me go ahead and play the song.
From village paths to city lights, a heartbeat strong, a guiding light. Through every hand the story flows, the power of giving, the spirit grows. We are the chains, the future's call. Together we rise, we stand tall. From every voice a song begins. Everything they see the strength within. Across the plains, the rivers run. Each act of kindness fuels the sun. From every corner, dreams take flight. Uniting all and share delight. We break the myths, rewrite the tale. Together as one, we will prevail. Our given spirit, bold and free. A force of hope, a legacy. Unshakable pride, dream of thriving, the future's near, a continent rising, a bold and clear. Africa, you're here to be here. What we bear, only we share. Celebrate the power, the stories untold, a legacy written in hearts of gold. Oh, Africa, our voices sing a brighter future. Together we bring.
Okay, Rose.
Yes.
I think we need to now just let you go ahead and close this out for the official program. Thank you to everybody. And then we'll share some links because now they can get the report, right?
Yeah, this is the point at which we release the report, right? The
Yes.
official launch. So thank you. Mine is just to say thank you. Really, really grateful to everyone that gave us their time tonight. Where I am is tonight. It's morning elsewhere. Really, really appreciate your insights, your questions, your enthusiasm, and urging us to go even further. Many questions remain. So we look forward to seeing you again, to engaging. So please send us questions, visit our website, visit the African CSO platform. And as you do that, please register on that platform. It's one of the ways that we are gathering data. As Becky was saying just now, it's difficult and expensive to gather data. We're trying to make it easy by leveraging technology. And so CSOs registering on our African CSO platform help us to gather this data. So we're gonna have a 30-minute, it's not less than 30 minutes, right?
From
It's
Village
more like our talk back. So those of you who can stay back, you're very, very welcome. And those of you that have to leave, thank you again and goodbye.
All right, so Rose, oops. So let me go ahead and go to the questions that were
Right.
So there was a specific question for Bongi. Bongi, the question for you was, sorry, let me just, there's so many messages in here. Okay, so it's from Innocent Masaira. Bongi, you're absolutely spot on. My question to you, or rather the process I propose you guide us through, is how we might decolonize the term philanthropy and reframe it in a way that resonates with the spirit of Ubuntu. Could you share a few suggestions? I sense your wisdom in this area and would greatly value your insights.
Is
Thank you. I
Bongi
do
still
doubt
with us?
the,
Yes.
I do, yeah, I am with you. I
Okay.
doubt the wisdom part, but I would say we certainly need to do a storytelling on philanthropy from our own perspective, whether that, and someone like Becky would help us frame it such that we're able to redirect how the philanthropic narrative goes. Because there are some basic principles that are not quite as, that are not very much in line with who we are. And so once Becky helps us to frame it, I think, and we have conversations about it, I think we can go far.
Okay, so do you want to bring Becky in?
I don't know if he can do it now, but certainly
Okay.
he would be someone
Okay.
who can help us. People like him can help us do this. It's not going to be an easy thing to do. Yeah.
I just thought maybe he may have some thoughts on it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
But I saw you taking notes earlier, Bongi. I think you wanted to share something before
Well,
I
I
had
wanted
to
to
do
share
the other
something.
part. So go ahead.
It was a small thing that I
No,
wanted
it's
to
okay.
share.
Please go ahead.
About, I think we're talking about, how do you keep your donors? How do you keep the individual? And what do you do? And it's all about, fundraising is about relationships. And I don't think we've spoken enough about relationship building. It's all about relationships. But the second thing that someone taught me as I was raising funds for the Children's Hospital, and they said people love to be asked to guide. So sometimes you don't go in there to ask for money, you ask for their thoughts.
Yes.
You present your proposal and you hear them out because they want to be participants. That's the contribution I thought that is often missed, is we are reporting to and so on, but we forget that some of these people, like I said, they have shared values, are people who want to be seen as participants.
I agree.
Thank you, Liz.
I agree. Thank you so much. Becky, I've got a question for you. It's still innocent. Apologies for not reading the report, but I guess anyway, but I'll ask the question regardless. Does the research account for the billions of dollars channeled into civil society organizations through churches? In addition, does it include the significant funds associated with Black Tax? If not, the research might have some limitations. Could you elaborate on this? I think that's really more for
Yeah.
Rose, but
I
okay,
think it's
let's go
more
ahead.
for Rose than
It's for Rose,
more
yeah.
for Rose than me, yeah.
Uh, the straight answer is no. It does not look at those dimensions. And this is a personal sort of
Yeah, we
personal
talked about, you were telling me about that yesterday, the black
view.
tax.
Yeah, I kind of have an issue with framing our giving as black tax because I think it's we this is system, we take care of each other, right?
Yeah.
Does that mean that system doesn't get abused? I mean, every system gets abused, right? People take advantage of things, but I think it's really dangerous if we start to look at our humanity and the values and practices that have kept us alive through really difficult times, slavery and everything, and call it a black tax. So just a personal opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you. ABC, you're on. I see you turn your camera on. Come in.
No, I think I totally agree. And it's also in the beauty of how we've been able to get some pride in what we do and how we do it. And how we've also tried to change that narrative. I mean, I was recall while I was entering the sector, someone wrote an article to say, you get to this meeting, then you see these nonprofits wearing sandals and all of that, looking tattered. I'm like, no, this is not the picture of what we do. Even though we earn low or discounted salaries, we pride ourselves in being able to impact and also support the vulnerable in communities. And I think it's within that pride that also we now need to start ensuring that we're not accepting any narrative that doesn't suit the type of good work that we do. And this good work is also good for the economy. And that's why I would always support. 5 years ago, we started working on a methodology for us to measure the economic impact of nonprofits in Nigeria. And from 2025, we would hit the ground running, of course, benefiting from the work that has already been done by John Hopkins, Dr. Professor Salama, and also the work done by other nonprofit associations in the US, the UK, and also Australia as well. So we need to start putting some science to to the impact that we make economically and socially. And I think that should inspire some level of pride in us as actors or practitioners in the field.
I agree with you. Sorry, go ahead, Rose.
Yeah, there's a comment that I had seen and I now can't find it from Jerry Salol. I think he was responding to BC's response to return on investment and the whole issue of altruism. And he rather differed and brought up the issue of reciprocity, that our giving is also reciprocal. And I give because tomorrow I will need, today you need, tomorrow it will be me. So there's also this thing of, it's reciprocating. So and there's a value and a benefit. That's a real benefit, right? Yeah, just thought I would throw that in there.
Oh, so it says, yeah, he said, I'm unsure about this focus on altruism. I think that we need to really understand the reciprocity that really drives giving. We pay too much attention to altruism. That was what.
Yeah, but again, in all fairness to you, having done everything, whatever the reciprocity, whether you're my friend or we belong to the same association, the same club, or you're doing this for the purposes of me being able to pay back later, altruism still seems, in my opinion, to cover everything all. Because in the end, the fact that you're able to do good makes you feel better.
Yeah. I agree with you. I want to ask a question of Becky, but before we get to Becky, I want to ask you, ABC, because this is a plug for an NGO, but I think it's important for folks who may not necessarily be plugged into their respective countries, sort of networks like yours, the importance of being connected to them, because that's part of the story and it's part of the access. Can you help them to kind of unpack that and understand that a little bit? And then Rose, you can talk about the benefit of the platform, how they can be on that too, but let's go ahead, OABC.
I think joining networks has to be strategic. You need to know why you're joining the network and what importance does this network bring to. For us at the Nigerian Network of NGOs, we ensure that we protect our members. And by protecting our members, protecting the sector as a whole through the work we do around enabling environment for the work that they do. But of course, nuancing the day-to-day feedbacks that they've given us for us to be able to defend the sector. And I just cited an example where I was sitting down with the tax regulators and I was telling them about the economic impact of shutting down my sector and giving them examples of how much the Nigerian network of NGOs itself have spent on flights, giving them details of how much we've spent on workshops and also helping them to see how all of these affect other sectors. And going further into now analyzing the big 100 NGOs, how much they may have spent. Now taking it back to the over 174,000 nonprofits that we have at this time in Nigeria, how much they're also contributing to the economy, not to now talk of the taxes. So I think those that are interested, so networking is not for networking's sake these days. It's for you to check, does this network actually serve my purpose?
Yeah.
And I've always said to myself, big nonprofits may not necessarily need networks because they can do it on their own, except when they are attacked. That's when they want to come under the anonymous
They need
of,
they need the cover.
of a network. But
Yeah.
small nonprofits will need you because of the capacity. They need for them to access funding. They need for them to solve regulations and all of those bits. So and networks will always have their stereotypes. Not everybody likes networks, especially if you're so influential and powerful. So again, all of this has to be managed. But for me, I would join other networks because one, capacity, best practices, peer reviewing, coaching and all of those bits. I would also join because I also want to be able to stand under an umbrella that can protect me just in case I run into trouble.
And thank you. And Rose, can you talk about why someone should join the sign up for the African CSO platform? Why should be part of that? I think we may have the ability for people to see it, but I'd like you to talk a little bit about it because I don't think we spent a lot of time on that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm always delighted to talk about the African CSO platform because it represents sort of a culmination of bringing together of our work. And what it is really an online portal, and not it's a platform where we have been, where we brought together all the data and growing database of African civil society organizations. So to date, we have slightly over 3,000 organizations registered on the platform that can be searched. And they're categorized, segmented, by thematic areas, by size, by location, et cetera, et cetera. So the whole goal of that is to make it easier for those that are looking to connect or learn about African civil society organizations for whatever purposes. Could be a funder who's looking for new partners, could be a journalist who wants to interview a CSO on something that's happening in their country, could be a researcher who's looking for CSO information. So that's one bit. And then the platform also has enables registered CSOs to share their content, so they can write articles, they can share opportunities, funding opportunities that they're aware of, they can share conference opportunities. If they have a job that they're advertising, they can post it on the platform. And likewise, Epic Africa also shares content. So we share funding opportunities, we share training opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, so we are seeing the platform and are building it to be really it's a social space. So enabling connection among and between CSOs themselves, among and between CSOs and funders, et cetera. So we are now reworking after 1.5 years of learning. We are now embarked on enhancing the features of the platform so that it becomes that connecting actually becomes, so you can find a CSO that's in your neighborhood, because oftentimes what we see is our sector is so siloed, people don't know who exists. So you have 5 organizations in the same locality doing the same thing, but they don't know about each other.
Right.
To talk about networks. But for us, what is also really exciting is that this is a space where it really becomes a gateway. If you think about it, like if you want to, I think it's Oya Bisi who said our sector is hardly ever covered in the media. So if you want to learn about African CSOs or philanthropy, our whole sector, actually, where do you go? There isn't any central place that you can go. So we're really building this up to be sort of, that portal to information and data on the sector. So I know I emphasize CSOs, but anyone can actually register. So
I was going to ask. Who else?
You can register as an individual, you can register as another entity, a funder, a research institution, so there's that option as well, or as a CSO if you're one. So we're really, really inviting you to, and when you register, please give us feedback. We're constantly wanting user feedback. What do you like? What don't you like? What would you like to see? What worked well? What didn't work well? That's an ongoing project, as it's a never-ending improvement process. So yeah, please let us know what you think. Yeah. Where's our link?
Let's put a link. Please, someone put a link in again into the chat for people to sign up.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's wonderful. So I feel like I want to bring Becky back if we can. Becky, can I ask you to come back for a moment, please? There's a question here that I think would be interesting for you to answer for us. Oh, there you go. Okay. So these are some comments that were made, but I feel like you could probably address them for where you sit. So this is from Florence Watara. The issue must be addressed in conflict zones as certain parameters are taken into account. The socio-political environment is different. So I guess she's talking about how we need to think about, when we're talking about philanthropy and all these strategies, what do they look like within conflict zones? That's one. Then the other thing that someone named Iba Sar said is, a main obstacle in Africa is that many governments see NGOs as opponents. So how do we get around this? So how do we talk about creating an enabling environment, but how do we get the sector to see, how do we get the government to see us as not as the enemy, but as an actor that's actually, in many times, bridging the gap that they're not able to address?
Yeah, maybe let me start with the last question around the perceptions of governments when they look at CSOs and see them as enemies. I think there are contexts that lead governments to think like that. It's always very easy for governments to associate civil society with the opposition.
Yeah.
And in countries where there is a struggle for democratic culture building, and in countries where they are still going through transitions from authoritarianism to some semblance of democratic culture and good governance, you will find that what the opposition is fighting for is what civil society broadly is also fighting for. And so it's so easy for government to easily bundle civil society and the opposition together and see them as enemies or seeking to change. And so you will see that, as I think starting around the early 2000s, you started seeing an emergence and mushrooming of NGO laws right across the continent. And those NGO laws were responding to some of those contexts around, the elections and where most opposition parties were getting stronger and stronger. Some of the protests that were happening across the countries, some of them led by civil society, the calls for accountability and democratization, etc., etc. So those made most governments to really try to close the space for civil society. So I think there's a way in which we should contextualize that and also ask deeper questions around civil society and its association with the political society. Of course, every member of civil society is also a member of a political party, or they can become members of political parties. But I think when it comes to the demarcation of sectors, it's always difficult to want to belong to political society and civil society at the same time. And I think that's something that we really need to pay attention to, because it gives governments an ammunition to actually work with. But that's not the only reason why governments actually do that. I think the other reason is really for convenience and politics that governments do that, because they know that real power resides among the masses, and civil society, by its very nature, is the voice of the voiceless. And so if you are a government and you want to maintain a particular status, whether it's one party state or it's a particular form of ruling, the first sector that you are worried about is that of citizens and the amount of power that they possess, because they are the ones who vote, they are the ones who can take to the streets and so on. So governments tend to then just want to demobilize and weaken civil society. So in terms of really trying to make sure that you bring government to the side of civil society, I think it's a long-term process which involves a lot of strategies, and not all of them are going to succeed, basically, because it's politics. So some of them include identifying, some of the progressive voices and champions within government that can work closely with civil society to champion certain policies, certain guidelines that civil society wants to adopt. So, for example, the idea around creating an enabling space for civil society, you want to work with particular progressive individuals within government who have got the potential to actually change the thinking of some of the government departments and some of the policies of the sector. So that's one, I think. But the second, I think, is really civil society doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is that civil society is supposed to hold government to account. It's supposed to speak truth to power. And that should not change simply because government sees you as an enemy. It should still proceed and continue. So I think it's a combination of factors that we should really be thinking about. I don't think it's just trying to draw government into your side. It's really about realizing that each of those sectors are wired in a way that they want to achieve particular outcomes, and to do so, it might include collaboration, it might include contestation, but it might also include threatening each other, which is what these governments are doing.
I
think
also sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that I think the other persons will just comment really to say, when thinking about how philanthropy is exercised and how giving happens, we need to take into account, the socio-cultural norms, the politics of the place, even the state of the economy. All those determine the extent to which philanthropy is practiced. So they were really comments. I don't think they require.
No,
further.
I agree with you. Thank you. That was great. This is a question for everybody, but I think I'll ask Bongi this question if you will indulge me. This is from Mark Maxmeister. It's how would you even ask people in a survey in Africa about how they perceive Black tax? We at Giving Tuesday had conversations about that, but don't have a clear answer yet. I don't know if you're Rose, maybe Bongi, if you want to try it, but I think now that I think about it, I think
it's
Becky and Rose could.
Yes.
Rose, you want it?
Yes.
Can you just ask the question again? Sorry.
So
my question wasn't paying attention. No.
How would you even ask people in a survey in Africa about how they perceive Black tax? We at Giving Tuesday had conversations about that, but don't have a clear answer yet. And I guess, Rose, you're Giving Tuesday board member, so maybe you can try and we can see what the other folks have to add to this.
I don't know. I think for me, it's this thing about language, right? At one level, and maybe going back to something that I said at the beginning, how it's even surprising that we're surprised that individuals give to civil society, because we see it and yet we don't see it because we have these lands and we call it something different. So for me, I wouldn't even ask that question actually, because in the African context, there's no Black tax. I think that's a very American concept. And so I wouldn't ask Africans about Black tax. I would just ask them about how they support friends, relatives, community. Does it take a toll on them? Are they able to do it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough. Anybody else wants to jump in on that? Okay. I want to just get final thoughts from each one of you. Let's start with Queen Bongi, and then we'll go to our kings, and then we'll round it out with Queen Rose on just final thoughts that you want to leave us with your wisdom.
Just to say thank you to Rose. Thank you for initiating this very important conversation and bringing us to something very, very important today. So really just to say a big thank you to you, and a commitment to support you as you continue to deepen the study and what it says. and begin to tell the African story the way we want our story told, so that we don't have to deal with insults like black tax and things like that. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay. Becky, do you want to go?
No, I also want to echo what Bongi has just said. And also I saw a comment by Kumba, requesting that next time we should try as much as possible to bring other regions as well. I'm sure she's referring to Francophone, Lusophone, and others, as well as young people, because I think all of us here are old now.
Who's
So
old?
it
Not me.
Yeah, so but actually really to thank Rose and everyone and who's been here. I mean, people have stayed behind even after 2
You
hours,
wanted
so
this.
it really shows that this is an interesting report with lots of possibilities going forward. Like I said, I think there are so many questions that still need to be researched further.
That need
and
to
I
be
think
funded.
I
Yeah.
need to be funded.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
OABC?
Yes, I think for me, that we now have a tool that can be used in advocacy, but also that can also be properly deepened at the country level as well.
Yeah.
So it serves as both a baseline
Yeah.
For what we already know, but also what we can do with that data as well, especially in the areas of enabling environment, as you have rightly put it, but also in inspiring that confidence that citizens are already given, and that citizens' participation can only be improved if we have that enabling environment for them to give to causes and organizations that they do believe and trust. So let me thank Epic Africa and other Rose's leadership for giving us this, for giving me this very important tool that will be helpful for my advocacy. And also to thank you, Liz, for the good moderation.
Thank you very much. And thanks for joining us again. Rose, before you close out, I just need to make sure that we acknowledge all the people who are part of making this happen. From the Epic Africa team, we have Joyce, Paul, and Sega. From the International Social Impact Institute, we have Ludmila and Stuart. We've got our skilled interpreters, David and Mariam. And of course, we have to acknowledge our AI co-pilots that helped us harness digital storytelling tools to amplify African voices. And Rose, I'll let you go ahead and close us out. What do you need?
Well, first of all, again, thank you to everybody for this wonderful, wonderful conversation. As I said, it's just really the beginning. I think for me, the parting words, one, just the importance. I think our conversation really underlines the crucial importance of an ecosystem, strengthening the ecosystem for philanthropy. And ecosystem, that's such a big word, but we are representatives of that ecosystem. Becky doing the kind of research that he does and all this other work he's done, or you're busy with the networks, ourselves with the bit that we're doing. And I think my big appeal to those that want to support the growth and development of philanthropy and civil society in Africa, we've got to build this infrastructure, because this is the infrastructure that will provide sort of the underlying support for civil society to thrive and for African philanthropy to thrive. So even all those things that we were talking about, what do organizations need to be successful at individual giving? Who's gonna develop those tools?
Yeah.
Organizations can't be left on their own to do that. And that's why we never do it, because we are left on our own to individually do it, and we can't. So really the support, even as they support for individual organizations, to also support the building of a strong infrastructure. Yeah, and so we need funding, we need partnerships, we need thought partnerships. So really looking forward to also, and we already have a partnership with CAPSI, a research partnership, and really to growing these partnerships and connections and network, because I truly believe that one organization can't do it alone, no matter how well funded and how big it is. We need to connect, and we need to have a common agenda around our vision around how we grow philanthropy real, true African philanthropy. Yeah, so say thank you again to my team, to say thank you to the panelists, thank you for your time and your thoughts. And two people that I would also like to thank and that were not mentioned before is, of course, Halima Mohammed, who was actually our lead researcher, our thought partner, over many conversations and finally, you know, crunching the data. She wasn't able to join us for this webinar, which was really unfortunate, but, you know, hopefully she'll see the recording. And the second person that I really love to thank is Sarah Hughes, who took the first, you know, version and turned it, you know, she was the main editor and just turned it into a very, very powerful story. And I have to say that she did it pro bono. So again, so philanthropy exhibited the values and practices that we're talking about here. You can also give time. We focused on money, but there's also time and there's talent that also goes into the mix. So thank you very much. And Liz, of course, for your amazing, not just moderation, but, you know, you've been a partner all through, you know, thought partner and yeah. So thank you so much for yeah, karibu.
Okay,
Yeah,
you know, we have sorry, go ahead. What?
No, I said that's it for me. So,
I want to leave them with a song. Can we leave them with a song? Let's make it. Let's
Sure.
leave with a song.
one more time.
Let's make it fun, you know. And thank you to everybody because you gave us your most valuable asset, which is your time.
Yeah.
Okay. It's loading. Okay.
From village paths to city lights, a heartbeat strong, a guiding light. Through every hand the story flows, the power of giving, the spirit grows. We are the chains the future's call. Together we rise, we stand tall. From every voice a song begins. Every day they see the strength within. Across the plains, the rivers run. Each act of kindness fuels the sun. From every corner, dreams take flight. Uniting all in shared delight. We break the myths, rewrite the tale. Together as one, we will prevail. Our giving spirit, bold and free. A force of hope, a legacy. Unshakable pride, dream of thriving, the future's near, a continent rising, a bold and clear. Africa, you're here to be here, you're giving and calling to what we bear. The power of the land to be, only we share. The rise and glory of the day. Celebrate the power, the stories untold, a legacy written in hearts of gold. Oh, Africa, our voices sing a brighter future. Together we